Welcome to RainbowSoul Vodcast, where our Soulstrology comes forward to help you manage your everyday life, with forecasts and deep dives on natal charts and queer perspectives on the planets, transits, and more. A group discussion about upcoming transits with tips on how to read these transits in your own chart. Hollis offers years of wisdom and natal chart knowledge with Brighthawk's positive perspective and LeKross's inquiry. We offer the complete queer astrology experience. Welcome to RainbowSoul. Please help us by subscribing, sharing, and commenting and reviewing. You can also learn where else RainbowSoul is offered on our website at RainbowSoul.show.
Hi there! Welcome to Rainbow Soul Astrology Forecast. This is for June 3rd through the 9th, and I'm so glad you're here. Thanks for listening. Thanks for tuning in. We totally appreciate you. And, because why would we bother doing this if no one listened? Except that it is kind of a great way to learn this part of astrology, transits, and predictive astrology. I would say that Brighthawk and I have been listening to astrology forecasts for probably 10 years at least. Yeah, because I kind of showed you that you could get them on YouTube. And that was 10 years ago. So I'm going to say that listening to astrology forecasts, it really teaches you astrology. So I just want to say, if you're still learning astrology, this is a great way to learn it because you're like constantly, astrology is a language. Yeah, totally a language. So I'm so glad you're here. I'm, of course, Hollis Taylor. I'm the astrologer, and I'm one of the astrologers here today. And this is Brighthawk, and she works with me. Unfortunately, LeKross is not with us today.
Yeah, so it's great to have a chance to go through, look at the stars for the week and the transits and see how it'll affect all of us because we all live under the sky. And if you ever have questions, just let us know in the comments below. And Hollis does a great job of checking the comments and answering folks' questions.
I try. I do my best. In fact, I want to talk about one question today, and eventually I'll get to a point where I can feature questions. But this is from Meredith, and Meredith, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but Meredith was talking about, and I'm glad we're talking about this because our meditation will lead us into this. Is that so? If you have ever noticed. So a rulership of a sign is a planet and a zodiac that are well matched because their energies are similar. Okay. And so sometimes at this point in astrology, in this time, we have some zodiac that have two rulerships. Why? Well, like, why does Scorpio have Pluto and Mars, right? And there's a traditional ruler because we've known about Mars for a long time, right? Because Mars is very close to the Earth. So we've been able to see it before the technology has allowed us to see Pluto. And then a long time ago, when they did discover Pluto, they then later decide and watched what happened with humanity when Pluto was aspected in a variety of ways and went back and researched the history and things like that. That's how they decided, okay, well, the modern ruler of Scorpio is Pluto. Okay. And there's actually several zodiac like that. Okay. So then there's also, what was I going to come to? Pisces. Its traditional ruler is Jupiter. But its modern ruler is Neptune, right? Because Neptune's way out there and it's taken us a while to discover it and figure it out. Okay. So, and that's pretty much how it works. And then what happens is there are some zodiac that share a ruling planet, and that would be interestingly like Taurus and Libra, which both share Venus as a planet that rules their sign. Okay. And so then also Gemini and Virgo share Mercury. Okay. And so is it because, is it because well, I think it's because Mercury can have two faces, just like Jupiter can have two faces, right? Jupiter can be very much about expanding and spiritual, and Pluto can have a very Mars can have a very two-face, can be about action and stuff like that, but it can also be about war and control and things like that, okay? And so can Venus. Venus can have two faces. It can be very much about resources and money and things like that. It can also be about love and relationships. So when you think about these different signs, Mercury and Gemini is very much about communication and things like that. And Mercury in Virgo is a different type of communication. It's more grounded communication. When Mercury is in Gemini, it's very airy communication. It's like, okay, and it's very intellectual, okay, and it's usually very fast. And Mercury in Virgo, it kind of slows down a little bit. It slows down, okay? And maybe Virgo might be a little bit more grounded, okay? And so that's the difference. And right now, there are some astrologers that have been doing this for way too long, probably, but long enough to help us decide, okay, well, maybe Mercury is just the rulership of Gemini, and maybe we say that Mercury is the traditional ruler of Virgo, but maybe Chiron is the modern ruler of Virgo. Okay? We don't know that for sure. They're contemplating Chiron and maybe some of the other asteroids. I've often wondered if the asteroids will get ruling signs, and I think that they kind of should. Like, I would definitely put Lilith in Scorpio, right? Okay. So right, Lilith and Scorpio, right? And I was thinking about Pallas Athena, and I was like, huh. And then I was thinking about Juno should definitely be in Taurus, okay? So there are different asteroids as well, and we're also discovering planets. And so yes, Vulcan has been discovered, but most astrologers are not reading it yet. I mean, there probably are some very future Uranian astrologers that are. Clearly, they are, because Meredith's teacher is. And they may see that, I think Vulcan might be the modern ruler of Virgo. And maybe that's true. Maybe it will become the modern ruler of Virgo. I don't know. But I will say that that's definitely left in the hands of what I would say are master astrologers. Okay. So I'm just saying that that's a little bit of info for you to understand how things like that happen and why. And so that's why it's happening, because we're slowly discovering more and more of the universe and how that influences us. And if you've ever noticed, most of the zodiac are not very feminine, right? Or not very woman powered. And it's kind of sexist. Well, that speaks to our history, doesn't it? And so Virgo is really the most feminist of the traditional zodiac. But what was interesting that Anne Ortley talks about is that as the asteroids started to all come out during a time where she said Venus was stepping into a higher vibration, during the Me Too movement and before that and stuff, like sort of leading up to that, there were many asteroids that were discovered during that time that started to be used in astrology. And I think all of them, I mean, other than Chiron, all the other ones, Juno, Pallas Athena, Lilith, all of those are named after female goddesses on purpose, because that is the empowerment of women in astrology. So I hope you enjoyed that little lesson, a little tidbit that I think is fun and interesting. And I'm like, oh, well, at least astrology spoke to our history of being a little on the sexist side, and now we've started to balance the scales. Now we just need to get to more of the queer stuff, which some people like me and some other astrologers are talking about Uranus and Mercury being more queer, and maybe including both or neither, or at least pushing the gender boundaries. Okay, so there you go, my friends. And maybe more will arise. Maybe there might be some other things that come up. But for this time, for this here and now, I invite you to have a little meditation with us. Take a deep breath. Find yourself present in this moment and here and now. And I'm hoping that you could imagine yourself under the night sky. With your feet flat on the floor, your bare feet walking on the soil, staring up at the night sky. You can see the stars, and they seem to go on forever. And you notice the constellation of Gemini. And within that constellation, there is a bright burning bulb that, as it zooms into you, shows itself as Mercury. Mercury. They are the messenger of spirit. They deliver the messages. Through the magic of intelligence, through the magic of the brain, through claircognizance in the back of our minds. When we just know things, when we just come to understand something naturally and can communicate that clearly, precisely. Mercury in Gemini is in its rulership, in its strength, through the intelligence of human beings. Encouraging us to use our intelligence for good, emotional intelligence, intellectual growth, and seeing things forward. Mercury and Gemini, it just knows what is true and can see forward in its light. And as quick as Mercury ran up to you, with its messengers from spirit. It turns and runs as fast as it can. The super fast intelligence of Gemini and Mercury together help you feel grateful for your own intelligence, your own ability to stay connected to things that you love, your ability to multitask, to know several things at once, to have many projects open at once, to learn more than one thing at once. And we are grateful for the messenger of spirit in its rulership. And we can come back into our bodies, into our gratitude, settle into our bodies. Wiggle your hands and your toes. And I invite you to come back into the here and now. Thank you, Bright Hawk. It's beautiful. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Take us on a little journey.
Always happy to be the musical magic carpet ride to your lovely, lovely journey. Meet the planets, meet the transits, meet the rulers, meet the...
Shoot, sometimes I think it helps me understand them because I tend to have Mars in Gemini, so it tends to be very fast. And so sometimes I take off and then I'm like, oops, I was supposed to. Okay. And so it's just kind of a thing. And so I sometimes appreciate the meditation, the slow down to really think about what it means. So I'm going to invite you. I'm going to share our screen, share our keynote, our presentation, so that you can see the charts. All right. There we go. Okay. There we go. Great. So I just wanted to offer that, and hopefully you can see everything okay. This is the Soulstrology forecast for June 3rd through June 9th. We do miss our buddy LeKross. Hopefully LeKross will be able to come back. I don't know. We're talking. He's like, I don't know. It's Pride Month. Okay, so Pride Month does get busy for all of us. We're traveling. Plus, we have 2 Pride events to present at. I'll be doing readings, and Bright Hawk will be selling her art at Longmont Pride in Colorado, and then at the end of the month we'll be at Boulder Pride doing the same thing. I'm not sure about LeKross's schedule, but I will probably also be at Lancaster, PA Pride, in case you happen to live in Pennsylvania. Okay. Well, Bright Hawk will be there with me. We'll be there. Okay. All right. So I just want to say, how's your Gemini season going so far? Have you felt it? Did it happen? I was laughing because so Gemini energy is very clear communicating. It's a lot of very high energy, often very fast. Things tend to go very fast. Did you ever feel like spring just zooms by? Yeah, it always seems to zoom by. Gemini season is just like, right? What happened? Wait, it was just May and now it's June. Okay. So, that happens. That's very, very Gemini. And the interesting thing about Gemini season is not to say that Geminis are crazy, because that's not true. What I'm saying is that sometimes I notice that it also happens in the fall. That if people are already a little, cuckoo, they go cuckoo during Gemini season. They also do it in the fall. And it's almost like the transitionary time or something.
Huh.
I don't know why, but like I run a group with 30,000 people. So that's like a mass of people, okay? And all of a sudden the moderators, the sun moves into Gemini and the mods are like, what is going on? Like just one thing after another, and I'm like, oh, geez, here we go. And so it's just like if a person, they don't have to have any Gemini placements at all. They could just be kind of cuckoo for whatever reason. And so then the cuckoos go cuckoo is what I'm saying. I don't know if it's like the sped up energy and then maybe in the fall it's the slowdown, like it's the transitionary energy or something, but definitely something happens.
Yeah, I'm not sure I know why or what it is. I'm always interested that you point this out because for me, Gemini's opposite my sun Sag.
Right.
So when it's opposite your rulership, that tends to be where you're very uncomfortable. So whatever's opposite you. So I've wondered if is it me? It must be me.
Oh, like you get okay.
It must be me. I'm noticing all these different things, but
No.
I'm fascinated because you certainly are gaining more and more and more and more experience with all the readings you do and all the folks you see. So
And managing a group with 30,000 people, you start to learn a little bit about crowds. You start to learn a little bit about the mass of humanity and how they're affected. And I think it was last Gemini season, we had a whole bunch of people in the group kind of like freak out, and some person went crazy, and it's like, oh my God, like she got committed to a hospital crazy.
wow.
And not that there's anything wrong with people that have mental health problems, but I'm just saying that like it seems like a breaking point. Like I don't know if the energy gets going so fast that the people with already mental health challenges like kind of just break because of the energies going so fast. I don't know.
I don't know.
Or maybe it's because of the multiple personality energy, a different side of them comes out. I've often wondered that with Gemini.
I wonder about that.
So if you've noticed that you're like, oh my gosh, Hollis, I'm all of a sudden became a different person, it's okay. It's the Gemini energy. I'm sure you'll be back. I'm sure it's actually who you are meant to be, or a portion of you. And then when Jupiter jumps in this week, when Jupiter jumped in, all kinds of great things started to happen. So people with Gemini placements actually were feeling really blessed. And I was like, oh, this is so awesome. So the people that I did know with Gemini placements started telling me about blessings that they were having in their life. And isn't that beautiful? So I think that's really awesome. Great things coming in for them. And now on the first day, on June 3rd, Mercury enters there. So what does that add? Well, it adds exactly what I said, which is that intelligent energy, that clarity of mind. All of a sudden, multitasking may become easier. I do notice I multitask better during Gemini season. Like I won't, like if I have a project, so I'm a little what they call ADHD, but I think that's just a sign of intelligence. And so then I have, 3 or 4 projects to open at once. I'll actually finish them all I won't like not finish it and then go 4 days later and go, I never finished that. And so, so I'm just saying that you may find that it's a little bit easier to focus on multiple projects at once, multiple things at once. So if you do have ADHD, stop giving yourself a hard time. Just say you have a lot of Gemini energy. And
I have felt very ADHD, but not in a good way. Not like you're being productive. Well, maybe I was very productive yesterday, but
yeah, don't judge it. Just love it instead. And so I try to love that part of me that jumps from thing to thing. And I try to help other Geminis and people with strong Gemini placements in that way love that part of them. I've learned to love it through my life. There was a time that I had the time wrong for my chart, and I used to think I was a Gemini rising. And I used to think that maybe that was true, and that jumping around from thing to thing actually was actually just the way, like, I started to learn that having that Gemini placement was actually a blessing. So if you find that
embrace it. Okay.
Yeah. So
Working
if you
on it.
so and don't, because our culture puts so much pressure on really dumb things like that. Like, who cares if you have 4 projects open at your house? Whatever. Like, who cares if you have a painting project, a gardening project, and online project, and whatever else. You could do whatever you want. And as far as I'm concerned, I like to have a lot of things going at once. It keeps me more enriched. It keeps my mind on point. So I think that it's actually something you could embrace. So hopefully, and with Jupiter there, Jupiter is already leading the way and creating a clear space for us, I think. And, we still have that minor trine in the sky. It's barely a minor trine at this point, but it is, with Pluto, Neptune, and now Mercury. So Jupiter's moving off of it, Mercury's moving through it. So that's just going to be great communication about our visions going forward. Now you'll probably be able to, like, clearly say, this was my vision forward. This is what I was going to do. Okay. And with Venus and the Sun, both at 13 degrees in Gemini at the beginning of the week, it's going to be great for resources and money. So it could really support you in that regards, as well as like relationships. And then, of course, it's in a trine to the South Node in Libra, which is ruled by Venus. So it's probably going to be a lot about relationships, and maybe, Gemini also rules networking. So it could be a great network, could be great in that way. It could really help you recognize, oh, I have to connect with this person to do this thing, or to help me with this thing. So that's probably the beginning of the week, recognizing your connections, relationships, money coming in, as well as, Jupiter and Mercury there right behind it, being able to help you to clarify exactly what your vision was going forward. So how's the moon up to in the beginning of the week?
Well, and I just also wanted to emphasize that relationship thing, because Sun conjunct Venus, it's exact on Monday, at 13 degrees Gemini. So that's pretty powerful and fortunate too, because you've got Jupiter not far away and they're no longer conjunct, but all of Gemini is being influenced by Jupiter, because Jupiter influences everything.
This is big.
Because it's big energy, man. So, and you've only got 5 planets in that. Well, sorry, 4. Mm-hmm. Uranus isn't crossed over yet. So the moon, ended a void course at midnight. So we enter Monday with the moon moving into Taurus. And Taurus is, of course, Earth fixed energy. And we've been talking about Taurus being ruled by Venus. So the moon is answering to Venus, and all the planets in Taurus answer to Venus. So Uranus and the moon. So a lot of emphasis on Venus and everything that Venus represents. Values, relationships, love, the things that are important to you, who's important to you, what's important to you, what you really value. Yeah, so the moon is going to be in a square to Pluto. And that's not always the easiest. Squares are usually a kind of a decision point or a challenge. Can be, instead of using the word challenge, we can totally use the word opportunity. Opportunity to grow, opportunity to transform, opportunity to see something differently. So, of course, Pluto is retrograde and at 1 degrees Aquarius. Pretty soon it'll be stepping back its toe into Capricorn for just a little bit. And
just enough to give us all a little heart.
Stir the pot really hard right around election time. Scare the crap out of everyone.
Right? That's Pluto. It likes to scare you.
Well, and Pluto returned for the United States. Hurrah! It's intense. It's a lot. And of course, Pluto, the cycle is 240 years. So Pluto's back to where it was when the United States was initiated.
Not quite yet, but will be very soon. This fall.
Yeah.
Yeah. Capricorn.
Yeah. When it all
Yep.
back and forth.
Right
across that line. It's been there a really long time. It's been opposing my moon for a really long time. Sorry.
Her moon, my Saturn. So,
yeah. Yeah. Oppositions, conjunctions are, like close conversations.
Mm-hmm.
Oppositions are like yelling.
Yeah, and on the 4th, it's mostly a lot of the same energy. Although I noticed that Saturn came into a square with the Sun and Venus that are still traveling together. Saturn at 18 degrees. So I imagine it will get more precise. Saturn in Pisces at 18 degrees in a square with the Sun and Venus at 14 degrees in Gemini. I think this is an opportunity. I think this is an opportunity to make relationships that could help you grow, especially in relation to business or whatever Saturn rules in your chart, business or money or system or so hopefully it will really support that. And that's really like the biggest change on the 4th as we go forward, the 4th and into the rest of the week, is that Saturn square happens. And then there's some other things too, right? Because the moon is still in Taurus there at the top of the sky.
Yep.
So the moon is in Taurus in a sextile to Saturn. So that's pretty good, right, Bright Hawk?
Yeah.
That's a good conversation.
I would hope so.
Yeah.
I would think so.
Because the moon in Taurus is, it's practical and grounded and stuff, but it's in a sextile to Saturn. So, and Saturn's in Pisces. And Saturn in Pisces always makes me feel like restricting of emotions because Pisces is so emotional and Saturn restricts. And so it always makes me think of a restriction or like trying to control emotions. But it's in a sextile, so it almost feels like your emotions are allowed to be present, at least for this day on the 4th, while the moon passes by.
Fascinating. Thank you for that.
You're
because
welcome.
I, of course, have Saturn in Pisces. I had my second Saturn return when it started into Pisces. So I've never thought of it that way. But now that you've said it, I'm like, wow, that's so obvious and so duh. Wow, I never thought of that. Saturn constricts, Pisces oozes all over the place. So constricting your emotions. Wow. Well, that explains a lot of discomfort.
Right.
Thank you. You're a very good teacher.
Try not to do that to yourself. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then of course on the 5th, so you can see Saturn's square is going to become more and more perfect as the Sun and Venus move. And so that square, the Sun is about the way we're going, and with Venus, it's about relationships, and Saturn trying to restrict emotions in regards to relationships. But maybe that could be good, like sometimes I think we feel things, and I know I personally have weird feelings sometimes of like insecurity or like suspicions or distrust. and things like that. And, the Dalai Lama teaches that distrust comes back to being self-centered. And so, and then sometimes then there's like, and then sometimes you can get to like righteousness and arrogance. And I just want to say with Saturn and Pisces, and in a square to the Sun and Venus, could very well be about developing compassion, and or developing some sort of understanding or compassion, or allowance for emotions, allowance for love to be expressed, allowing for things to be expressed. And I think that's the opportunity in that time, because Gemini is usually fairly emotionally intelligent. Usually the energy is pretty emotionally intelligent, unless they're really lost, unless the Gemini person is really lost in their shadow, or they have some really tough placements that make them closed off to other people's emotions. But most of the time, Gemini would be, at least Gemini energy can bring forth emotional intelligence. So that's like the biggest thing there. I see the moon moved into Gemini, Bright Hawk.
Right. The moon is, it goes void at 8 p.m. And now we're kind of back to that regular schedule of the moon moves every couple of 2.5 days. And the void, of course, moon is usually about 30 minutes most this week. And of course, then it enters Gemini. And at this point, what we would call a dark moon, right? The day before a new moon is the dark moon. Some people do ceremonies around the dark moon. Some people do their ceremonies on the new moon. It's the conclusion. It's the finish of one sign into the next. And of course, when we move from Taurus into Gemini, it's moving from earth into air. And of course, we have a huge amount of that going on in this week, this month. Everything moving one by one out of Taurus into Gemini.
I'm going to plant my seeds.
Yeah.
I'm going to try again. I'm going to plant my seeds outside.
Yeah,
Okay.
New moons are great times to plant your seeds. Spring has come so late here on the mountain. It's just
but
literally
I can get
the
some
aspen
peas, maybe.
popped this week. It's nice to see the hills greening up. And we had flowers. We had to bring them in from the snow and frost earlier in the week. Hello. Okay, so
Yeah, so, and then I also notice later on in the week here, that square gets more perfected here, because now the Sun and Venus. So that square is going to probably sort of build up through the week, and then later on in the week, you're probably going to recognize what emotions you've been restricting. Maybe there's a relationship that you've been, holding back some emotion or not expressing something, or even like, with Saturn and Pisces, that could also be like intuition, restricting your intuition, or doing what I see a lot, which is the dismissal of things, where you have an intuitive sense about things, but you dismiss it as valid. A lot of people do that. Oh my gosh, a lot of people do that. It is the most common thing I coach people with. And then I'd say there's also, the Sun and Venus are both in a beautiful trine, as well as even Mercury starting to come up into a trine with the South Node. So there's lots of things being let go. You're really ready to move on. You're really feeling that transformational energy, and you're ready for summer. That's really what I feel like is happening here. It's really preparing you for what's to come.
Yeah. It's the Gemini new moon. So those of you who have Gemini new moons, this is your new moon. It's incorrect. It's no longer square to Neptune. It's square to Saturn. It's square to Pluto. And of course, when we have a new moon, obviously the sun and the moon are conjunct. And of course, we have Venus right there. So all that energy plus Mercury in its rulership in Gemini, not very far away, but not totally part of the conjunction party. So yeah, now it's how are we thinking about things? In addition to all that Venus feeling about things, we have a Gemini moon that's gonna hopefully unite head and heart. Very interesting, this conversation about Saturn and Pisces and how it constricts emotion. So especially since it's in a square to the moon. So could be a wee bit on the challenging side. The other thing I'm noticing is that this is also between earlier in the day, the moon squares the nodes. And Judith Hill talks about the moon squaring the nodes. It's kind of a potent moment in folks' chart.
It's really strong when, so most people will feel it when the moon is squared their natal. Frankly, I really love Judith Hill's book on the nodes, because she really helps you come to the understanding that when things are conjunct to the nodes or squaring the nodes, that those are really impactful times in our lives. So I hope you're paying attention to where your nodes are. If you're learning astrology, those are the kind of like horseshoe looking things. One is upside down like a U, and that's the south node. And then the one that's like, the other way, it kind of looks like an N. And that's the north node. That's the way you're going. Okay. Sorry, it's not the north node. Yeah. Okay. So sorry. And so the nodes, when you're squaring the nodes, it can be a challenge that helps you let go of something old and put onto something new.
Oh, okay.
So like it kind of helps you move on. And then depending on where the planet is and what sign it's in and what node it's conjunct, then it will also. She said like minor aspects are usually pretty minor, and trines you barely notice. But and it will matter. She said that when the nodes go backwards, that's most of the time like the build up and you working towards your destiny or working towards letting go of whatever had to be let go of. And that's most of the time. And then occasionally the nodes will go forward. And when they're going forward, then that's a time that that things could actually happen, like something could actually happen that was part of your destiny or part of what was supposed to happen. So they're very sort of destined moments, like fated moments. Especially if you have an aspect during that time. Okay, so like you want to look and see where your nodes are. They move every couple of years, so it's really they could be anywhere in the chart really. Right now the transiting nodes are in Aries and Libra.
Right.
And so the moon will square them a little bit earlier in the day, probably early morning hours in mountain time. And so they'll square it. And when Gemini moon squares it, I would say that you might have to like visit your thoughts. Like, what old belief system or old thought do you have that you need to let go that can help you move forward? Right. Okay. And it could just happen very quickly, especially with Gemini. It could happen so damn quick that you're like, that you're wondering. Okay. All right.
Cool.
There we go. All right. So, as you can see, there's a lot, there's still a lot of blessings in the sky. I also think it's fun that Pluto and Neptune are in a sextile. I think that that's a positive thing. I really think that's going to really make us turn around and say, I wanted to go that way, and damn it, that's the way I'm going. Because Pluto is really, and since it's retrograde, it's really about inner reflection and helping us recognize the way we wanted to go. And Neptune, Neptune is about our vision forward. I see it's in a square to the moon, which is in its rulership.
Yeah, exactly. And Neptune is one of the signs in its rulership. Venus was and now has moved out. Mercury is now in its rulership. So, of course, when the moon comes home to Cancer, it's home in its rulership. It's happy to kick off its shoes, relax. You know how you feel when you get home. You're like, thank goodness, I can eat what I want. I can watch what I want. I can do what I want. I'm home, right? So the moon is going to be void, of course, before it switches from Gemini into Cancer. It'll be void from 12:15 to 12:41. Again, very typical void, of course, moons this week. So if you can take a break, if you're joining us for the first time and you've never heard the term void, of course, it's that moment before this moon changes signs. And of course, every time it changes signs, that's a big adjustment, right? You're going from airy moon to watery Cancer. It's coming home. It's going from Gemini is mutable and Cancer is cardinal because it begins the summer season. So yeah, if you can take a break during a void of course moon when the moon's energy is less, that's why void, right? It's not a time to initiate projects. It's not a time to for outward energy. It's a time for inward energy. Perfect time to take your lunch break, sit under a tree, meditate, go for a walk, be in nature. And if you need to take advantage of the void of course and low emotional energy, sometimes you can use it to your advantage. Like maybe you have to talk to somebody who's frequently emotional and you want it to be a non-emotional conversation. You could do it during a void of course moon. And if you do, I'd love to know how this goes. I'm really fascinated by it.
Yeah, I think it was Celeste, Astrology by Celeste. We took a moon class with her, and she's a really great teacher. She's very good. And she's the one that said it's also a great time. Like if you want something to go unnoticed or just go under, you want to put in for that 2 weeks of vacation that you're not sure that your boss is going to be happy about. You just put it in during a void of course moon and see what happens. So that's perfect.
Let us know. That's perfect. That's perfect.
It's perfect. Look at the time of that. That could totally be at work, and you're like, when it takes 3 weeks in August, right? Okay, so that would be a good time to do that. So let us know if you do that, and if it comes off really well, let us know. Even if it doesn't, if it doesn't work that way, tell us. We want to know.
Yeah, for real.
So I also noticed that the moon and Mars is a sextile, and then the moon is square like that to Neptune. And I'm thinking that this has a lot to do with feeling like you're not enough. Why? Because feeling like you have this vision you want to do, but like you're starting to take action, maybe prepare for it and try to make this vision come through. But there's that emotional part of you that says, I'm not educated enough. I didn't go to the right class. I didn't take the right course or whatever. Because not that the moon in Cancer is not always, inherently insecure, but it's in a square to Saturn and Pisces, which can sometimes be a little on the insecure side. And then on top of that, it's in a square to Neptune, which Neptune rules Pisces and can sometimes be a little insecure. And so it's just like, I'm just thinking that's exactly what came to mind. It's just that moment of feeling like, is there enough? And that's the square. And the square is meant to be something you can overcome. So something you can go, well, I just need to change my thought about this. I can do this. And maybe you just need to have an affirmation, some mala beads, and you say an affirmation every day. I can do this. I can do this, or whatever it is. Just believe in yourself. So on June 7th, just watch out for that. Friday, you might have a little bit of, a little bit insecurity. Don't worry about it too much because it'll pass pretty quick. Thank goodness, because the moon does that. That's what I always think about when aspects are happening in the moon. I'm always like, well, it moves fast. Thank goodness.
Right.
Moon, Mars, and Venus, and even Mercury, they move pretty quick. So, you can get through it pretty quickly if you just kind of hold on there. Now, a lot of the conversations will continue with Pluto and a sextile to Neptune, encouraging your vision going forward, and Pluto and a trine to Jupiter, which is blessings and really seeing the expansion and maybe really seeing it clearly. Hopefully, you're also like, maybe you might even be getting like, oh, someone offered you to do a class at their thing, or someone invited you to their event, or something like that. All of those kinds of things could be happening for you. And with Mars in a square to Pluto still, it just makes me think that there might be moments of insecurity or trying to get things done, and maybe there's a little bit of issues or problems that you might have to work through. But I think overall it's pretty good energy. Now the moon is in a square to the nodes here again.
Yeah.
So
this
in
is
Cancer.
when it perfects. Yeah, it's
Okay.
actually when it perfects.
Okay, so this is when it's perfecting.
Yeah, you can see.
And the moon is in its rulership here. And I would say, moon in Cancer is just very sensitive. So being very sensitive to where we're going and where we came from. So being very sensitive to who we are, I think. Because a lot of people identify with where they're going and who they were. If that makes sense.
I totally makes sense. I'm very there.
Mm-hmm,
I got it. I got it.
We're all bigger beings than that. So try to remember that we're all human beings and we're all here for a reason, and life is a journey.
Mm-hmm.
And so it isn't a trine to Saturn though, so that's great.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe allowing the emotions to come out and express. Maybe just be a little careful about that. Sometimes I notice the moon in Cancer doesn't know what they're feeling until they're crying, and then they're like, I guess I'm sad right now.
Right. Because Cancers, think of the crab, they're soft and mushy on the inside. They might be crabby on the outside, but but
and this is on Saturday.
Usually, of all the signs, I would say Cancer is the least on the emotionally intelligent. They're very smart folks, in my experience. My father was a Cancer. Big-hearted people. Family's really important. Home is really important. Being a good host is really important. And so my experience of Cancers is that they're very smart, but like you said, they're smart in other ways, not in their emotional field. It's a coming out of them when they finally realize XYZ. And that was true of my dad. He would be happy as could be. And then it was usually because of my mom. And if she was nagging for too long, then he would get mad. And he would hear how mad he was as he was expressing himself.
Right. And that's usually how it goes down for them.
Because we were like, oops, you pissed off the wrong person. Get out of here.
Right.
So, yeah, Cancer can, you're right. Cancer moon, that is one of the fine lines there. Lines.
It's just that sometimes emotions sort of come up and then you realize you're kind of dealing with them as they come up, rather than where Scorpio will deal with a whole bunch of things underneath and then tell you about it. Gemini will do the same thing. They'll deal with it completely personally and internally, and then they might share it with you if they trust you or whatever. Yeah, so it's just kind of a thing. It's just a different way of experiencing emotions. So, and then on June 9th, we continue with great aspects and great things going on. The thing that I did notice is that Mars moves into Taurus on this day on June 9th, which is Sunday. And so we're going to start getting a lot of earthy action. So what does that mean? It's usually like manifestations, like things actually coming together. You actually made a few bucks from that project you've been working on. Someone actually, purchases something from you or whatever it is. This is Sunday, June 9th, as Mars moves into Taurus. That the reason I'm focused on the money part is because Taurus tends to be financially centered. Okay. But it's earthy centered. It's like the luxuries and the things So maybe you're making art. Maybe it would be like us, and we'll actually make a sale at Pride or something
would be
like
great.
that. Now Pluto and the moon are in opposition, and therefore both in a square to Mars, and that's kind of creating a little bit of a T-square.
For sure.
And so it's asking, and I think that's really about, especially with Pluto and the moon opposite each other, that's very much about, I want to transform and change, but I'm having these emotions come up out of nowhere. And they're in a square to Mars, maybe keeping us from taking action. Like we feel like we don't want to do this, or we don't want to do this or that. And I think that's that's just part of the challenge. Just push through it. Just know that the moon will move fast.
Right. And breathe. Go for a walk if you have to. I get a little concerned when I see that moon Mars square T-square with Pluto. Don't lose your shit. Don't let somebody, have the satisfaction of you losing it. Just take a breath. Go change your situation. Drink water. Eat food. Let it go. This could be an emotionally intense one, and blindsiding kind of intense, where you are suddenly furious faster than you can kind of calm down. So in my experience, because I have Mars on my ascendant, and it scares me sometimes.
But it's in an earth sign.
And it's
Virgo.
in Virgo.
Mm-hmm.
But still, my Mars can scare the crap out of me, and probably some of the people around me. Fortunately, Hollis goes, okay, 10, 9, 8, I don't last long, but I fortunately I go off like a little sparkler or letting out the
it's like
air
a
in a
sparkler.
balloon.
It's like a sparkler. But that's the Leo moon that I can count on fizzing out.
Yeah. And, as I've gotten older, I'm embarrassed by such outbursts, so I really try not to. But Mars is Mars, and depending on where Mars is placed in your chart is where how your energy expresses relative to anger, aggression, violence, feeling threatened, feeling fear. These things can trigger Mars in a big, like, I'll show you, or whatever the situation is that's triggering. Confrontation with Mars is not
it is a god of war, right?
Right. There you go. So, and then of course, when you have the moon in Leo, and this is part of why I kind of know what I'm talking about, because I'm a 0 Leo, you've got the moon going from a water sign into a fire sign. So,
well, and I think it's just going to create a little steam. That's
just
all.
a little steam.
Yeah. And it'll move into Leo that night.
Right. Yeah. So the void, of course, happens from 7:05 to 7:29, about 25 minutes this time. And so, that's a great time for a break. Sunday night, sit back, relax, do whatever you like to do that helps you feel calm, relaxed, centered, ready for your week.
Awesome. Well, that's the week in as short of a podcast as we can get there for you. Hopefully we're trying this new platform, so please forgive us if that happens.
And it's Gemini season, so if we have to redo it,
we have to do things twice. Okay, so I'm doing the cards now, and I'm shuffling these cards. These are the Pride cards, Love is Love deck, and you can get them online. And so I'm going to pull 3 cards, and these cards are very much about past, present, future. I put them in the 1, 2, 3 if you know anything about doing tarot readings. And so this is funny because this is like totally Mercury. This is the 8 of Wands, and you can see this is very much the messages of spirit. You can see that this person is sort of tending to the messages coming in, listening to the messages, looking at them or sealing them with the little red heart there, see? And they're taking them off and reading them. And I just think it's very much about the messages from spirit, which I think is beautiful because, sometimes we think that we don't get messages from spirit, but we do all the time. Synchronicities, when, just not too long ago, Brighthawks had asked me if my acupuncturist ever like burnt stuff on me or herbs or anything, and I was like, no, I never even heard of that. And then the very next day I went to my acupuncturist, and she was like, I think you should go see this other acupuncturist. He'll do some kind of unusual things like burn herbs on you, but it really could help you. And I was like, okay, I'm going to say yeah. Because obviously spirit was trying to talk to me, right? So Brighthawk and my acupuncturist didn't have a conversation and say, let's drop these hints in on Hollis. No. Okay. Like, it was totally weird thing. So that's really what this is. Pay attention to those synchronicities. Listen to those synchronicities, because they could really help you. They could really lead you in the way you need to go. And frankly, if it wasn't for synchronicities, I would probably make mistakes often. Thank goodness. I'm so glad when spirits send me messages. So be open to messages. Speaking of messages, the King of Cups here has a message on his mind. Spending lots of time thinking about it, in the waters of what those messages mean and what to do with them. This is very much the King of Cups. The reason I say messages on their mind is because, well, it's a sailboat, and that represents air. And what does air represent? Thoughts. And so this is very much about the thoughts in our mind and how they are connected to our emotions. And if you didn't think the two were connected, you might want to check in there, because your thoughts lead to your emotions, and oftentimes your emotions can create thoughts. So the two are connected, like I don't know, like your blood and your heart. Okay. And so the two are very much connected. And so you just want to be paying attention to that. And that's really what this card is about, is pay attention to what you're thinking and how that's affecting your emotions. It is hyper important. Now, going forward, I love this card, is the Judgment card. I don't love it because I'm a Virgo and I like judgment or anything. But what I like about it is that that there is, first of all, a child in the middle, right here, right? Okay. And I feel like all of the other people in the image are kind of singing to that child. I think that children represent a form of divinity, actually. And so embracing children and understanding the gift that they bring, because they're the purest of innocence, usually, especially the younger they are. They hold innocence and they hold power within themselves. And this is about honoring our own personal innocence and also having discernment. Okay. This card is very much about having discernment, because we need judgment. If you didn't have discernment, you would just go walking off a cliff. Okay. And so you don't want to do that, hopefully, otherwise you'd be dead and you won't be listening to us. So it's a judgment card. It's about making that judgment, having discernment about what's good for you and what's not. And just because it's not good for you doesn't mean it's not good for others. So just try to hold on tight there, my friends. This is very much about choosing what's good for you and what's not. So remember, messages from spirit are coming in. Synchronicities are happening. You're hearing things from other people, and maybe you're even saying them and you're like, I can't believe I just said that. Wow, I said that. Okay, I heard that. Okay. And going forward, pay attention to how your thoughts affect your emotions and how those two things are connected and how your emotions can affect your thoughts. Okay. And so pay attention to that, especially since you just got messages from spirit. And maybe that was your message from spirit, is to pay attention to your thoughts and how they're connected to your emotions. And going forward, use discernment, especially in relationships, especially with people. And sometimes I think if someone triggers your inner child enough that you feel like you have to throw a tantrum, you might want to walk away from that person and then reevaluate why you're feeling that way. It's not always because you're a bad person, immature or stupid or whatever other story you tell yourself. It could actually be because that person is kind of on the abusive side, and they might be triggering part of you that is going back to a childhood experience that also happened. Okay. So discernment is very important. And just because a person is okay for others doesn't mean that person is okay for you. And you might need to decide what's okay for you and what's not. And that's the judgment card. And that's the power of the judgment card. Listen to your inner child. They know better than you think.
Brilliant. Oh man, I got to tell you, I really felt like I lived your reading last week. It was
Oh,
like,
really?
whoa, I'm in the middle of the tarot deck. What did Hollis say about this?
Oh, no.
So powerful readings, Hollis. Always
Thanks.
powerful. We wish you all the best, LeKross. We wish all of you in listening. Thank you so much for liking, sharing, subscribing. Those things help a great deal. We love your questions. Thank you, Meredith, for helping us sort of tee up the broadcast today.
Yeah, and if there's anyone else that has a question that about astrology, if you put it down in the comments, I will do my best to answer it in the beginning like I did today.
Yeah, and it's a ton of fun to do that. So we wish you all the very best. Thank you for listening to Rainbow Soulstrology, where we try to be a bridge between you and the stars.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to this week's Soulstrology and subscribing, liking, sharing, and reviewing. We hope you enjoy this dose of Soulstrology and encourage you to embrace the week ahead with an open mind and heart so that you may integrate the deepest of lessons from the stars. Take a moment to step outside and honor the planets, stars, and moon in the sky with your heart. Integrate the messages that resonate and leave the rest for someone else. We deeply appreciate each and every one of you. Always remember that you are a perfectly unique human with an exclusive star map of your destiny, your soul purpose, and your heart's desire. Thank you again for tuning in to Rainbow Soul.